Greetings and welcome to a review of sorts for Metal Gear Survive. As of this recording, I've spent a good 80 hours plus with Survive. I've completed the single player mode in its entirety, and have experienced pretty much everything the multiplayer has to offer at the moment. In the first part of this review, I'd like to stick to the facts of the game, and later on when it comes to things like the story, I'll be giving more of my personal opinion. Metal Gear Survive, at its core, is a survival game. You need to pay close attention to not only your health and stamina, but also to your thirst, hunger, and oxygen meters. You'll need to hunt wild animals, harvest plants, and use empty bottles to gather water in order to stay alive. Eventually, you'll be able to construct water purifiers, pens to store captive animals, and harvestable crops. Aside from staying alive, you're also heavily encouraged to explore and gather crafting supplies. Nearly everything in your environment can be taken or first broken and then taken. These raw materials can then be used to craft weapons, armor, structures, and food. While some supplies can be found in the clean areas, the best stuff is found in the dust, which is where you'll be spending a majority of the game. The dust is a dangerous, foggy no man's land full of the creatures you'll be fighting, known as Wanderers. The fog of the dust does more than simply cloud your vision. It will also make your minimap and placed markers unusable. This can be countered in a couple ways. The most rudimentary is by placing marker flags to use as a breadcrumb trail. You can also stick to natural roads, which will allow you to see your markers and minimap as long as you stay on them. While you remain in the dust, your stamina drains at a highly increased rate and you will consume oxygen from your oxygen tank. While you can use energy harvested from the Wanderers to refuel your oxygen tank, you can only do so a limited number of times before you need to return to base and repair it properly. You can also find transport while in the dust in the form of jeeps and walker gears, but these modes of transport all start damaged and only last a while before breaking down and eventually exploding. Base building is also a big part of Survive. You start with a fairly small patch of desert littered with debris, but as you discover more building blueprints, gather more resources, and rescue more survivors, you'll begin to build a proper base. The staff management system will be somewhat familiar to anyone who's played Metal Gear Solid 5, but on a much smaller scale. Each unit at your base corresponds to a certain function such as base security and food production. Combat comes in two varieties in Survive. While in the open world exploring, stealth is encouraged. Unaware enemies can be killed with sneak attacks. If discovered and the odds are overwhelming, running away is always an option. The other type of combat, which is the basis of the game's multiplayer, comes in the form of protecting an objective. Here the game takes on a more tower defense style. Enemies will spawn from certain points on the map and generally follow a certain path, setting up walls, mines, traps, or anything else that can slow them down or eliminate them is ideal. The combat system in Survive should be very similar to anyone who's played Metal Gear Solid 5. While you have many different handguns, shotguns, and rifles to choose from, melee is now a viable option as well. Machetes, spears, and hammers make up some of the weapons that you can use to get up close and personal with your enemies. Melee makes for an ideal mode of attack, as ammunition for your firearms is much harder to come by in the earlier stages of the game. So that about does it for the fact portion of the game. What's going to be next is more subjective. It's going to contain more of my opinion, and you may or may not agree with it. The story of Survive isn't anywhere near the same caliber as the previous installments of the Metal Gear Solid franchise. The cast of characters are more or less on the generic side, and the story, for the most part, is there to facilitate the gameplay, with the first third of the game functioning as one very big, very long tutorial. But once that's over, the story of the game really does come into its own and even manages to fit in with the existing Metal Gear lore. Overall, the story Survive tells is okay. It's not amazing, it's not groundbreaking, it's simply okay. Concerning the microtransactions, I actually didn't find them very obtrusive. Despite some people claiming they ruined the game, I hardly noticed them at all during the single-player portion of the game. They do become more noticeable after you complete the single player, most noticeably when base digs become available and you either need to wait 24 real-life hours between waves or pay to speed things up. Personally, I have no problem waiting, but I can understand how the not-so-patient among us could be annoyed by this. Extra character slots costing $10 is also something I'm not super happy about. But at the same time, I sort of understand. In the previous two versions of Metal Gear Online found in Metal Gear Solid 4 and 5 respectively, extra character slots weren't free either, so in that respect I sort of understand, but I'm still not thrilled with it. Everything else that you would need to pay money for are things that are nice to have, but in my opinion, unnecessary. These are things like emotes, limited passes that increase your resource gains, and extra storage for broken weapons and armor, which for the record, I never even filled up more than halfway during my single player game. And just like in Metal Gear Solid 5, Survive coins are given away weekly for simply logging in and can even be won by playing the newest multiplayer game mode. Is there anything I was disappointed by? Honestly, not really. Having played both beta tests of the game, I kinda knew what to expect, and I never bothered to get my expectations super high to begin with. If there's one thing that I was disappointed by, and I know this is going to be a really strange gripe, but it's this trailer. This was the Gamescom 2016 trailer, for anyone who doesn't remember. You see this? You see all this? You see these characters? You see what kind of looks like cutscenes here? Yeah, none of this is in Survive. None of this is in the game at all. None of it. So to bottom line it, for what it's worth, I enjoyed Survive. Would I recommend it? Well, that all depends on you. Do you like games where survival, tower defense style combat, resource gathering, exploration, and base building are key? If more than 3 of those things are something you hate in a video game, then Survive isn't going to be the game for you. But if you're fine with the majority of items on that list, then yeah, I would say you will probably enjoy Metal Gear Survive. Thank you for watching my review of Metal Gear Survive. Please do give me a like and a subscribe if you haven't already. Feel free to comment down in the comment section, and I'll see you next week with another Metal Gear Solid 5 FOB event guide. And until then, have a good one.